We think of history as something that's gone and has no effect on us. In truth, history has enormous effect on us, and it can have enormously powerful effect if the story that you're telling is a story that is something that's all about freedom and empowerment for women.
I experienced a real sense of call, and there weren't a lot of people that knew how to interpret a woman's call in the mid-60s in rural Nebraska. I was told things like marry a minister, mainly that. And when I got to Scarritt, I found this rich, rich culture of women, lay women, who were powerfully empowered to do ministry.
Scarritt as a school was one of the first, if not the first school as a college to integrate in Nashville, which is very controversial. We were the first to let in African and African American women to the college.
During the time that I was there in the 60s, when it was still Scarritt College, that was a very tumultuous time in terms of civil rights, anti-war, and Bill Barnes did some of the training for our group that summer and took us out for a lot of community organizing meetings around issues of racial equality, anti-poverty work in the city. So that was already forming. By the time I came back in the 80s, during the visioning process, in some ways it was a calmer time. I don't think it didn't feel like it at the time.
We knew that the college was shaky. We knew, and by then it was a graduate school. It had dropped its college status. And it was talking about future. And we knew it was talking with various seminaries about what future plans might be. And we were watching very closely about what was happening because we knew we had a claim on the property. That we is an editorial we, meaning women's division.
When I received the call from Dr. Welch saying that the board had made their decision to sell the campus and move to Duke, I knew we had a lot of work ahead of us.
The women's division was determined to continue the mission of Scarritt College. And the way that they did this was to purchase the property when it became available for sale. And this was symbolically significant because back in 1892, the Women's Home Missionary Society could not purchase property at that time because only men could. And so now these bold and courageous women had the power and the ability to be able to do so in 1988, and they did just that. This is important because it ensured that Scarritt was able to continue its legacy, its mission, and its history.
So once we decided we had to lay claim to those assets, and we let the college know about it, there was 5-6 months of extremely hard negotiations.
The Women's Division had purchased the property as the papers allowed it to do when the college was closing, and they knew that they wanted it to be a place that would serve lay women primarily. But beyond that, we were told to think big, think as wide open as we could. And I can remember throwing out ideas, some very wild. I don't remember exactly what they were, but I remember bursts of laughter. You're kidding, you know, we can't do that. Or wouldn't it be fun if? And I know that early on, obviously from the very beginning, we knew we wanted the mission focus and women in mission because that's who we were.
A place that was a catalyst where people, especially women, could find their voice to work for racial justice and for women's empowerment.
The idea of women's spirituality entered not too long after that, and the global focus on global education was always there.
We began to work, and we had before this, worked very hard to say, who are some of the people that are not around the table, that should be around the table, and do they have to all be United Methodists? And if not, do they have to all be Protestant? Do they have to all be Christian? So that's an ongoing conversation, but we began to make some changes in the way we thought about people who might be good people to be directors of the center.
I can remember sitting in those early interviews with lots and lots of different kinds of women, and then having conversations afterwards about, yes, she's brilliant, she speaks well, she obviously is competent, but is this where we want the center to go? And when we hired Maxine Clark Beach, we felt that we had moved in that direction.
When I came to the Scarritt-Bennett Center, I was very aware of the fact that there were these people that had made a real investment in saving the center. But I was also aware of the fact that there were a lot of people who were really grieving the loss of Scarritt College, both as a graduate school and as what it was when I was there, this really magical place. So I understood these buildings kind of had that life, and that there were these people that were dreaming this into being. And I wanted very much to help that happen. We started off with this sense that it would have this big hospitality need. We needed to fill the rooms. I mean, that was one of the realities.
As far as I'm concerned, and I have served as treasurer and chair of the finance committee in times past, it's always been a matter of money and not enough.
We had roofers on the chapel, and we didn't have a kitchen that was ready yet. And so for the first probably almost 2 years, we were always not quite ready for something.
I also remember all of the consternation, not with laywomen, but mostly with clergymen who would come and say, "What do you mean there are no telephones in the rooms in those days? What do you mean no television in the rooms? What do you mean I have to share a bathroom with the room next door?" Things that the laywomen were very fine with. A lot of the men took a while for them to say that was okay.
As part of this blueprint that was given, in that was elder hostels. We had probably 4 or 5 elder hostels a year, so that we would pack the place with seniors who wanted the Nashville experience. But I think it did lose its way a bit. That it, you can't just be a hotel. That's not gonna, the world doesn't need another hotel.
There had always been kind of a romantic fantasy or a romantic memory that somehow, at some point in our history, we had plenty of resources, and it's just now, whenever the now was, that we don't. As we looked back, as we could tell in the files, there was rarely a time in the history where we had enough resources. We were always, even before we were a retreat center, even as a school, that we were robbing Peter to pay Paul.
In the early years, to pull together a program was difficult. Maxine was lucky that Carlton Young decided that he would give some volunteer time as well as work part-time.
Carlton Young, who was the editor of the last 2 United Methodist hymnals, I had been at the center maybe for 6 months when he called me one day, and he said, my work with the hymnal is done, but I don't want to leave Nashville quite yet. They need my office. Do you have any office space that I could rent for a while? And he came over, and I think his appointment was like at 9, and at 1 o'clock we were still talking. We'd walked all over, we'd looked at all of the instruments. And finally I said to him, to Sam, he goes by Sam, I said, "You don't want an office, you want to help me with this." So I was able to hire him 1/4 time, and we started using the instruments. We called it Amazing Grace, and it was the very first time that the Global Praise Team was ever together.
Most of the emphasis on racial justice was workshops, other than diversity and dialogue. And I shouldn't forget that, because that's been such a highlight, and it's one of the longest standing programs that we've done.
I think about the tradition of Scarritt, and when black and white people could not meet together for a meal anywhere in Nashville, they met here. And in a sense, we were doing a new version of that old tradition.
And this became a place which talked about questions like immigrant rights long before people were really beginning to talk about that. It talked about interfaith concerns and did lots of work on that, not just sitting with scholars, but people, regular people in mosques and in synagogues and in churches, liberal and conservative, came here and were together here.
Scarritt-Bennett has been a place for a safe place, as well as a challenging place. It's both at the same time. It's not so safe as that it permits people to just deny the need for dialogue, whether it be racial diversity or faith traditions diversity, but it is a safe place where then people can have opportunity to dialogue and be challenged.
People were saying to me, Scarritt-Bennett Center is the best kept secret in Nashville. And I thought, if I have one personal goal, it is that nobody says that to me ever again. And how do we do that? So the desire to have people understand Scarritt-Bennett Center and the desire to open ourselves up to what I hoped was the diversity of the community gave birth to Celebration of Cultures.
And when it first started, it was a small campus event that really spoke to the great multiplicity of ethnic groups, cultural groups within the city that kind of came as a surprise to everybody when you suddenly had 25 to 30 different groups wanting to show up on the campus to do something.
And so we found dancers and singers and storytellers and people who made food, and we had our own conference and our own festival. I remember one of the men who had brought a children's choir coming in. He said, I want to thank you because your invitation allowed us to teach our children some of these songs and dances that were being forgotten. So that was, I thought, wow, that was a big deal.
When we finally turned it over to the city, we had 45,000 people at Centennial Park the last year that we held the festival.
It's almost like now, in 2013, that globalization is somehow popular, and to think of the world as a community. That was not a new notion to me. I was taught that in the early 80s by the faculty at Scarritt, that your neighbor was not someone who looked like you or lived near you. Your neighbor was all of humanity, and that God created all of those folks, and that no one was inferior. No one was left out of the kingdom of God. So that has not been new to me. But because of that exposure, it has carried me a long way. So in many regards, coming back to campus and staying a part of the center in a very lively way is because my values are the center's values, and my values have been so shaped by the center's values.
One of the neat things about Scarritt College is that it was practicing experiential learning opportunities before a lot of other liberal arts institutions. And that means that students were learning theory in the classroom and then taking that theory and practicing it in the community, whether or not it was rural or urban. Today we're returning back to our roots. And we're doing that with our Belle H. Bennett House, for example. I think it's been a wonderful opportunity for our women to become passionate about leadership, become advocates for social justice, and really find ways of being a change agent in their communities.
I've learned that social change is a process. I've learned that it's messy. I've learned that it's also really beautiful. It's really about teamwork and compromise and communal decision making and consensus building and all the things that we got to practice in our home.
And I think the world just so desperately needs a place like Scarritt-Bennett. There aren't many places today where it's safe to talk about some of the issues, and there aren't many places working for racial justice or for women's empowerment, and especially within the context of the faith community. Sometimes I think people outside of the faith community do a better job than the faith community.
Sometimes we can get so United Methodist that we forget that we are actually an ecumenical interfaith center. We are known in Nashville and Middle Tennessee for being the safe place for people to come for conversations, for dialogue, for study, for respite.
And I think that Scarritt-Bennett Center is one of a number of places, and maybe a primary place in the denomination, where leadership and education and visioning and experimentation with the issues can continue to have a platform that is national and global and not just local.
As a part of our 25th anniversary, we launched a strategic planning process, and we're very excited about our vision for the future.
It's one of the few places I know that's really doing a serious look at how do we recast ourselves, how do we rebrand ourselves, how do we stop now and look at our foundation and our mission and say, what does this mean in this time, in this place?
In the last few years, we've had several great programs here on campus. For example, we've done Poets Corner, Women's Table, Interfaith Harmony Breakfast, Tuesdays in the Chapel, Vespers and all that jazz. Our strategic planning process is helping us to expand our educational programs in innovative and globally minded ways.
Because we've always seen ourselves, whether we were a school or a retreat center, having a global presence in the world, that is both wonderful and challenging all at the same time. In the last years, I think as a retreat center, we have lost that presence. And for me, particularly as we're doing strategic planning, it's important to get that back.
We have this wonderful opportunity to go to Belize. There we'll be partnering with an organization adapting our diversity and dialogue program to help promote conversations regarding injustices that are affecting that community.
I'm a firm believer that property enables mission, and that having this space and these facilities enables other things to be done. The dreamers can dream on top of having the facility.
I think that the grounds still draw many, many people just to come and sit. And then I think sometimes that kind of experience then draws people to inquire further.
This is an amazing place. Lynn Westfield once said, when she stepped out of her car when she arrived here the first time, she said it was as though every bush was burning.
And as I set foot on campus, I remember the experience of prayer pouring out of me. I remember praying as soon as my foot hit the ground here. And I hadn't had that kind of experience before. There was something ancestral about this place for me. There was something about this place being steeped in holiness to me. There was something about being a part of a legacy of women, also men, but women who had sacrificed and who had challenged to do works of justice, to be bold in their faith, to go to other countries, to stand up for the rights of people when oppression was just too much to bear anymore.
That sacred place, you could not help but love it when you walked on that campus. And I'll always remember that for the rest of my life. Very vital.
It's kind of like a little piece of heaven that you have to work hard for.
As a director, probably it's not surprising that I hope Scarritt-Bennett has scads of money and can do whatever it wants, but at least enough money to be stable and to know that next year we'll be here doing what we need to do.
I hope that Scarritt will find a whole new expression of the mission. That 25 years from now, people will be saying not only Scarritt was a place that Martin Luther King Jr. could address the needs of the nation in Nashville when no place else would host him, but they'll be saying, and in 2015, the leadership of Scarritt-Bennett Center took this step.
I hope that the collaboration is blessed and anointed so we can go forward in miraculous ways. It is certainly our plan to continue a legacy of bold witness in the world. It is certainly our plan to continue the empowerment of women, anti-racism, education of the laity, spirituality, the same kinds of things that we've been doing for 25 years.
I just think Scarritt-Bennett has a unique role that it can play, and I'm convinced that the next 25 years are going to be bigger and better than the last 25, and I think they were pretty good.
And I would like to acknowledge the song played today by our beautiful bell tower, Rock of Ages. She is that, with stories to share. So bless you, Scarritt-Bennett, and thank you.